Welcome, listeners, to a very special recording about the DPC Alliance Masterminds. And one of the reasons I'm so excited to bring this episode to the airwaves is to introduce the listeners to what is the DPC Alliance Mastermind series. And today, I am honored to bring back Dr. Jack Forbush of the Osteopathic Center for Family Medicine, Hamden, Maine. And Dr. Clodagh is also joining us today from Car Direct Care in LaGrange, Illinois. So welcome. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Mario.
Let's first start off with what is a DPC Alliance Mastermind and who is the target audience for a DPC Alliance Mastermind?
Well, so the concept, I'll answer that if you don't mind, Dr. Ryan, and you can fill in the blanks, but really the concept of mastermind was really more of an organic growth or an extension of the very things that we have been doing individually with other new or wannabe DPC docs, partnering up or mentoring in a way with a DPC doc that has been involved in it to some degree for a longer period of time, and really is our opportunity to reach out in a quasi-formal, but still informal manner in a very concentrated way to provide, not just the things that we all want to know about how to start a business or how to transition our patients, but also to provide education about life skills, which is one of the things that I say it actually is DPC skills, which is going to be the big focus of our mastermind, but to really provide a more intensive, but yet still small group offering to those that are interested in DPC, those that have already started, or those that really want to mature. And I think the past year with a lot of the virtual meetings and inability to meet face-to-face, it has exceeded our expectations with regard to success. Many of them have been both in live and personal, which is what ours will be for those who either can't or are unable to travel to the great north. But it has really been the opportunity for us to have, as I mentioned, a nice little intense yet close-knit group to meet for a couple of days and really help folks either start or mature their practice. Would you say that's fair, Dr. Ryan?
Yeah, sure. I think I wish I started 4 years ago, and I really wish something like this had been around when I was looking. And it's just so nice it's so different. Large conferences were great for me, but that small group feel where you get to know the docs and you get to ask all the questions and you have their attention for a couple of days. That can really make a difference for somebody's frame of mind as they enter this somewhat busy DPC world.
Now, with regards to dates, Jack, when is yours, and Clodagh, when is your mastermind happening?
So our mastermind is occurring on September 10th and September 11th in the great, huge, budding metropolis in northern Maine, population of 7 and a moose. Joking about, actually, we have more than one moose. Okay. That wasn't really fair to the moose population, but it's September 10th and 11th.
Ours is somewhat of the opposite, even though I'm probably more rural in my background than Jack. I'm now a suburban doc, and we're almost on the edge of the Chicago proper in what's called Chicago land, on the train line from the city. Most of we're kind of like a commuter village surrounded by lots of other commuter villages. So we're about a 25-minute train ride from the city. And the village is called LaGrange, Illinois. And that's where my practice is and where the location for the conference is. So it gives us a lot of freedom. If anybody wants to come into town and fly in and stay in the city, we can actually make it back and forth on the train, no problem, from where we're going to be.
And that speaks to a good point that we've really tried to, which I failed to mention initially, we really tried to make these geographically very sensitive across the nation. We've had some in Wichita, Kansas. We've got Dr. Ryan's. We've got mine up here. We've got Hood, Oregon. We've got Dr. Purcell's down in South Carolina. So we've really tried to smatter them across the U.S., being very sensitive to a lot of the restrictions that have been in place and still make it more accessible.
Yeah, and I forgot to say what dates mine were. I think Friday, October 1st and Saturday, October 2nd.
Jack, let's start with your mastermind now in more detail. Okay. When attendees come in virtually versus in person, what is the itinerary set for your mastermind and what will the experience be like?
Sure. So ours is, as I mentioned, going to be both an in-live and a virtual offering. And I'm keeping some of the agenda items a little hidden as a teaser. But for those that are attending online, I'm going to do my best, make it my best effort to have as many multi-camera views for some of the procedural things that we're doing. So I'll give you a little bit of a teaser. I am affectionately, at least in my mind and talking with other people, phrasing our mastermind as the things that doctors think they know about or say they know something about, but really don't have a clue on how to do and are too afraid to admit to it. So it includes some of those things that we might have otherwise turfed off to support staff, even simple things like, I should know how to do an intramuscular injection, but I've actually never done one. And I don't really know how the proper protocol to do that. Or how do I change out my oxygen tank? Or I used to just give my office nurse or MA an order that said I need a chest x-ray, but exactly what kind of chest x-ray do I want? You go a lot of those really specific things that not only advances, your purview is not purview as a physician, but your skill set as a physician, but also provides you really day-to-day kind of survival skills, if you will. So whether it's those things or simple splinting or crap, what kind of information do I need to keep about a doctor in my Rolodex? Or, okay, now I have a staff member. What are some tips that I need to be sure to keep in mind to avoid irritating the crap out of my office staff so that they don't kill me during lunch? Or what in God's green earth do I actually need in my exam room in my office versus what I think I need? So kind of a lot of those really day-to-day, what I am affectionately calling DPC life skills, how to, not so much the business side of the office, but really the pragmatic and practical approach to providing care on a day-to-day basis. We'll have a couple of nice little medical lectures. My new partner, Dr. Chandler, upon request, has been asked to give a bit of an overview on osteopathic treatment. We've got several MDs that are coming that have really actually they've asked for that, so we've added that in. Dr. Champy, a longstanding DPC here in Maine, will be giving a couple of lectures as well and be with us all Saturday afternoon. So that's the strategy for our mastermind.
Is there a limit to the number of attendees that can come virtually and in person?
We don't have a formal number of those that can attend virtually. I think that's going to be primarily limited by bandwidth, which at the moment is fairly broad. So this will be live streaming. The ability of virtual hosts to connect are really much more dependent upon their connectivity than our streaming per se. There's no limit on the virtual. We're trying to keep the in-person relatively intimate. So most of them have been between 15 and 20. I've said I'm fine with the 12 to 15. We've got about half of that now. So we've got another half of the anticipated allotment to fill.
Wonderful. And Clodagh, how about you in terms of your mastermind? Will you also be having a virtual attendance option, or is yours in person only?
We haven't planned a virtual as well because I'm not as techy as Jack, as we were just talking about. I'd love it if somebody wanted to come and set it up and we could do that, but that might blow my mind if I had to do that as well as organize the mastermind, all the things that I might need from a technological standpoint. I do pretty well. DPC does definitely throw you into the midst of technology and you have to learn fast, but I am not as savvy with that. So we're going to do in person, and I think our location is pretty awesome. We have enough space for the upper. We probably will try and keep it small, 15, 20, but we have plenty of space depending on Delta and all that. We have a huge room and lots of room for social distance. It's got three walls of stained glass windows, so it's pretty nice. And it's right by all the restaurants and everything too. So what we're trying to do is we'll start with just an introduction on Friday around lunchtime, 1 o'clock. And then I'm lucky enough to have a very close DPC neighbor. Her name is Dr. Leah Gupta. She and I actually presented at the DPC Summit about our neighbor status and how we have made it work instead in being collaborators instead of competitors. So we are planning an office tour on the Friday afternoon. First, my office, which is less than a mile from the location, and hers is another 7 minutes west. And that will probably take us a lot of the afternoon. There'll be lots of questions, and I hope everybody will bring their cameras on their phones and take a video, etc. And so we'll do most of the talking. We'll have dinner like on Friday night in one of the local restaurants, and then most of the teaching will be on Saturday. And we're lucky enough to be also joined by Dr. Joel Schumacher, who's driving in from Indiana, and he has a practice. Dr. Gupta and I actually have separate, slightly different practices. Hers is micro practice, and mine is transitioned and somewhat half full with part-time staff, etc. So we have different, she started from scratch, I transitioned. Dr. Schumacher has a very full practice like Dr. Forbush and works with a lot of employers in his area. It's a rural, somewhat of a rural area. So he has a different perspective that I think will be very valuable. So we have a lot of different ideas. So there are plenty of DPC docs that will appeal to different people. I'm also lucky enough to be joined by a lawyer called Stephanie Posey, who's going to talk about the legal aspects of starting a DPC contracts and specifically some of the state laws in Illinois and surrounding states as well. And we have a few, just like Jack, I'm a few weeks behind Jack. So we have Dr. Schumacher is going to give a lecture on employer contracts. Dr. Gupta is actually a social media queen. I like to call her social media queen. So she's going to give a lecture on how to start campaigns on Instagram and how to utilize your social media when, if you're like me, you're social media green. So she's going to teach people about how to do that because she started her social media education herself when she started DPC. And she's really made a good success, has, a lot of followers, etc., and reaches a lot of people now. So that will be great. And then we have a couple of other things. I teach residents and students. I have a lot of different lectures, so there will be some surprise, depending on how far we get, because I think there may come a time when our attendees say, okay, less of the talking in front of us, let's sit down and let us ask all our questions. So we are very flexible. And I will have a couple of lectures at hand that I give to my students that are in healthcare system, DPC, and marketing, and making a network of like-minded specialist physicians around cash pay, how to get cash pay pricing, that sort of stuff. We have plenty of information, but we just have to see how far that the attendees want to go before they ask. They want to sit down and just talk. So. That's a nice thing about the masterminds. It's not set in stone. We will go with the flow depending on who is there, what their needs are. So we're able to pivot because we have all done it ourselves for several years. Dr. Forbush?
I agree.
But I was wondering how long that list of irritating things you do with your staff and how you get out of it. Can you just give us like a little taster of like, how do you not irritate your staff? Have you learned that already? I thought that was a good one.
I can give you a little bit of a teaser because, I think one of the struggles I noticed early on, and one of the things that I have heard with other folks transitioning or starting up a DPC practice, is this disconnect between being a physician and really being a bedside clinician, and just, I don't want to say turfing, but instinctively turfing things that provide an enormous clinical value to other staff. So for example, I draw probably 90% of all the blood in the office. And I do that intentionally because that gives me another patient touch point to learn something about them that I may not necessarily have learned during an office visit. And not that my staff would not have passed that information on to me. Please don't misunderstand me. But it's sometimes really great to get first-person experience. And I'll share another example from literally this last Thursday. I have a patient in the practice who was a veterinarian and called and said, I've kind of had these couple of days of intermittent chest pain. So we had him come over to the office, and kind of a quasi mid-40-year-old guy, no medical problems whatsoever. But as I and the medical student are doing his EKG, we learned firsthand that this really is an anginal equivalent. The short story is he had a positive troponin and an STEMI, had a 90% LED stent put in, and he's doing perfectly fine now. But it's a lot of those little things that I don't think we necessarily really appreciate that can provide a lot of very powerful interactions with patients. Going back to the lab test for a moment. And they expect it now, but even new patients are like, I didn't know that doctors even knew how to draw lab tests. So just changing the patient interaction, making it a bit more meaningful. I don't want to keep using the term intimate, but personalized would be a better way of putting it. Or being able to do the splinting yourself, for example, or, a lot of that kind of non-doctory stuff that, like I said, we all think we should know, but aren't are afraid to admit that we are not as comfortable as people think we are. So it's things like that that we plan on. That's not going to be that's not going to be the entirety of the weekend, but just really trying to provide a lot of those very simple things that we can do.
Fun fact, I was a phlebotomist in med school, paid my rent.
There you go.
And I have never been so glad to have that skill as when I started my DPC. Because
isn't it amazing?
Yes, and I do have a great nurse who does draw a lot of my labs, but if I have a patient who comes in, she only works 2 mornings a week. So if they come in a different day, I just draw them myself, and it's really been great.
And you could probably attest to this. Like I said, you learn like little nuggets of the way people say things that you don't necessarily learn it when they're in an official office visit, because they're not really coming in for an office visit per se. They're coming in to get their blood. Right. So their guard is a little down. They know it's just going to be really quick coming in the morning and getting it done first thing, and they move on. I can't tell you the number of things that I have learned simply doing those EKGs, injections, vena, all that kind of crazy stuff.
Thank you guys so much for sharing more of the details about each of your masterminds. And what I love is that, as you guys have said, these are smaller groups. They're not hundreds and hundreds of people attending the conferences. So you're able to mold your masterminds around the group who come to engage with you guys and learn more about DPC. So that's spectacular. In terms of who can attend, I know you guys talked about who the target audience is, but do you have to be a DPC Alliance member to attend? Can anybody attend? Is it only for physicians? Of the target audience that you guys mentioned, who can sign up for the masterminds, and how do they go about doing that?
Well, so the masterminds are available really to anybody who's interested in direct primary care. There is a discount for direct primary care Alliance members, which is I think it's about $100 discount or something like that. But folks who are not Alliance members are more than welcome to register. If they go to dpcalliance.org and simply select the events tab at the very top, DPCA calendar tab at the very top, it'll bring them to our events calendar, which will default to the month that they're on, and they can see when and where the masterminds are. And then simply clicking on that calendar link will take them to the specific registration page.
Yeah, and I think the event is really, it's ideal for anybody who's even just unhappy in their job and they're trying to figure out what's out there. Especially, I know Maine is not easy to get to, but Chicago, you can drive in from so many other states. No offense, Jack, but really you live in the the back end of beyond.
Well, you can drive into Maine, you just may not be able to drive out, that's all.
People will come and do vacation in your state.
Right.
Actually, Chicago is a great city to spend a few extra days too. There's just so much to do. It's really, the food here is awesome. But it's nice because I think there's so many people who are, there's even a year and a half of the pandemic has really turned the tide as regards more and more being exhausted and ready to walk. And so if it's something that you even just want, you're just learning what direct primary care is, just come. It's not that expensive. You'll learn a lot and it might inspire you and get you ready to go and leave that crummy job and start your own thing. And then it also works really well for those who are just ready to begin or have within the first year or so. I think that's the attendees that will get the most value out of it. But Jack and I both have, how many years are you in DPC, Jack?
Going into my 8th year.
Yeah, I'm 4 years and in a couple of weeks. So between us, we have 12 DPC years. And so if somebody's been doing it for 2 or 3 years, or even 5 or 6 or 10, and they want to come and learn more about what Jack or I do, and I think everybody's going to learn something.
And the nice thing about comparing Dr. Ryan's practice and my own is if you want to know how to do things right and efficient, go see Dr. Ryan. If you want to know all of the mistakes to avoid, come to my practice. Okay.
You've learned from your mistakes. And
well, some would argue that I haven't, but that's okay.
Well, and so have I. I think we all make mistakes. Everybody, even if we tell you not to make mistakes, everybody will make mistakes, and you learn. It's all a learning curve, right? Every failure can be turned into more wisdom. And we have definitely, it has not been a smooth road for me either. And I've been blessed to have staff who I never irritate, who have been with me from day one, have been with me even pre-DPC and have been there. We're still figuring it out. And I think we all, even the seasoned DPC docs, when we get together, I learn so much that I go home and try to incorporate into my DPC. In fact, Jack helped me a couple of months ago with my tech, with my hardware. I wanted to get new computers, and I called Jack and I said, I know you're the tech guy. Let's, tell me what you think I should get, and it'll help me a lot. So we all have slightly different skills within the DPC community, and I think everybody will learn something and have lots of fun.
Yes.
A bit of crack. And just so that everybody can tell I'm from Ireland, my plan is the Saturday night of our mastermind, and it hasn't been fully set up yet, but my husband and I play It's Our Other Life. And so we are planning with, hopefully it'll work out. There's a local Irish pub, and I'm going to get together a few Irish musicians, and everybody can just come and listen to some Irish music and get their dinner, chat about DPC. And beat that, Jack, beat that.
I have heard you play. There is no way anyone can compete. You are to use the word phenomenal would be an understatement.
Well, I appreciate that.
Phenomenal.
I'm planning on talking more than playing, but everybody else can play. But I do believe that Jack was talking about fresh lobster, so that sounds like a good draw. He's got that'll be nice for the foodies that go to Maine.
That just my own little personal plug. Go listen to Dr. Ryan. She is just simply indescribable.
And this Irish pub is a pretty cool place too. So it'll be a nice way to finish off the weekend if anybody wants to stick around. And we always like an excuse to play music. So
yeah, play music.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask this question because with you, Clodagh, and Dr. Gupta doing your presentation on how to be collaborative with nearby DPCs, one of the things that you guys touched on during your presentation at the last AAFP co-sponsored Summer Summit, if someone is thinking about DPC, not really sure of what it is, but for those people who want to know a little bit more prior to going so that they can come prepared with questions if they want to, what are some excellent resources that you could direct them to in preparation for coming to the masterminds?
I think we did touch on this, and my first instinct is I think everything online is free. For me, I literally inhaled for about 9 months before I started my DPC. The Facebook group DPC Docs. Now we have the Facebook group for the DPC Alliance, which is wonderful too. We have a Facebook group for DPC Women. No offense, Jack. And then we have and a lot of the previous lectures from previous conferences have been recorded and are on the HID website or YouTube. I watched as many of those as I could. So that's a lot of the free stuff. There is your podcast. Absolutely. I wish that had been around when I was opening too, but I did listen to Landon Russell's podcasts as well. That helped a lot. Anybody that has been interviewed on other podcasts, I've been interviewed on a few others, and I'm sure you have too, Jack, that are not necessarily DPC specific. Finding those resources are free. That's number one. Number two is there have been several seasoned DPC docs who have written books about how to open a DPC practice. And I mentioned at the DPC Summit, almost all of them were actually speaking at the same time. And then the DPC Frontier was helpful for all the legal stuff and just like learning where all the local DPCs were around me that I called, or getting their information. So I called some of them and said, hey, can I bend your ear? Can I ask you some questions? But one of the biggest things for me, I think, was mentors. And that's what I feel like the mastermind is providing in a way that, maybe somebody can do it in a more structured fashion. And what I did was I read people's stories on some of the Facebook groups. And then I just Facebook messaged them and said, hey, I think I want to do something like you're doing. Can I call you? Kissy Blackwell, Rebecca Bernard, and Sheetal Bhargava were all people I called before I started that I got their information from those groups. So don't be afraid to do that. And then for the structured part, come to the mastermind, and hopefully we can also help you connect with people that we might know that are closer to you geographically, or maybe that you have a side passion that you want to explore more, like some people who do lactation. I like to do metabolic health. I think, Jack, you touched on that a little bit too. Mm-hmm. Jack does a lot of osteopathic medicine. I also do a lot of mental health now, a lot more than I used to. So we all have side passions within family medicine that DPC has allowed us to explore more fully and more deeply and learn more about and be better doctors at. And some of those DPC docs, some of the attendees, they may want to be connected with physicians who are doing what they they would themselves would like to do. And I'm sure we can help facilitate that. Right, Jack?
I would echo everything that you've said. There are a lot of really good resources out there, and there are a lot of other resources that look good, but might not be less altruistic. Let's put it that way. But there are, I think generically, and I'll echo your sentiment on this, that those of us in DPC really have a heart to help folks escape the slavery and incarceration that our colleagues are forced into every day. We have this natural inclination to really mentor, partner, help, whatever term you want to put in there, to help our colleagues escape the chains of the medical industrial complex.
It's really important too. And Jack, you were one of the very first, so you didn't even have much of that, I'm sure. But for me, I read and I educated myself. But the part that gave me the most hope were the conversations and the people who said, you can do this. And said, you know what, you can go to Ireland for 3 weeks and leave your practice, and your patients will stick with you, and not one will unenroll. So, I didn't believe that because I was in the system until I was told that by another DPC doc. That part is so important, and I think that's what we're trying to provide through the masterminds, is a way for people who sometimes people are not that fond of just cold calling another person that they don't know. It's not something they can do easily. It doesn't come easily to them. So this is a way to ask all your questions instantly. That's another thing I think a lot of my mentees most of them would say, oh, I don't want to bother you. Or, I know you're a very busy person. It's not always possible to give them the time they need at that moment, but the mastermind allows us to do that in 2 days straight. So that makes it a lot easier for the attendees as well, because they are there to get the answers to their questions and can freely ask as many as they need.
Thank you guys so much for sharing more about the details of the masterminds. I will say that this idea that it's such an intimate experience, you cannot find that anywhere. And when, like you're talking, Clodagh, when you're talking about DPC, even if you are a seasoned DPC physician, or if you've just learned about DPC, just having a group of people who are in love with the model in one room just starts getting all these different types of conversations and networking going. So this is a wonderful opportunity that you guys are bringing to the DPC ecosystem. And Nolan's excited about the masterminds too. So now both of you are on the advisory board for the DPC Alliance. So for those listeners who might not be familiar with the DPC Alliance and its benefits, could you touch on that a little bit?
I am very excited to say that I finally signed up for the Henry Schein GPO today. After, I generally tend to do these things when I need them versus when they actually come out, because that's the way I roll with the busyness of my life. But I'm very excited because our Quest rep, finally we had a really good Quest rep, and she has just left us, and now we've got a new one. We're like, I'm ready to get that Quest pricing so that I don't have to go back and forth to get pricing for individual labs. So I'm really excited about that. I did join the Facebook Live about 6 weeks ago, I think it was, when Gunnar Brown talked about the Quest pricing, the Henry Schein. I know I'm late to the game, especially when I'm a board member, but it was just more time and everything I need. So I've enjoyed I love discounts. I grew up in a large family. We grew up and discounted everything. So when I just love going to the discount page and like clicking on all of them and seeing, okay, can I actually, this will work for me? And then I appreciate the camaraderie and the somewhat selfless goals that I think we all have. The one goal we all have is to help other docs achieve freedom and start their own DPC. And I do really like the mission in that way, where we're all in it because we love DPC, and we're doing it for the movement, and we're all putting our time in, and education, and just it's been a fun ride for me. I'd like to see where the DPC Alliance goes. I know it's so young and fresh, and I think it's going to change in the next few years for the better as we grow as a movement, and hopefully we can be part of that growth.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Outside of all of the kind of member benefits of discounts and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that really, and in full transparency, I'm one of the founding members of it. I'm not saying that other than to reemphasize the point that I'm going to make, which is that all of us are looking for our tribe. We're all looking for those folks that are really people in the fight with us. And this is our tribe. These are the people that can understand where we were when we decided to make that transition, where we are in that transition and really what kind of physician that we want to be, really regardless of what our personal clinical interests might be or where we are geographically or whether or not, like Dr. Ryan just graduated from medical school last year and I did it like last century. So independent of a lot of those kind of put people in a box labels that our cultures become really accustomed to doing, it's really completely agnostic to those things. And I think that is one of the big strengths behind the Alliance. And and I think you mentioned, you alluded to it, Dr. Ryan, it's a safe place to ask these questions. It's a safe place to ask those silly questions that I don't really know how to ask, but I really want the answer to. And this is the place to do it. So that's my spiel.
Well, I think too, there's an excitement in the air when we have Alliance meetings and everything in that early adopters have a special air about them. And I don't consider myself an early adopter, but it's so nice to see other doctors having the drive to do something that was very scary and new and frightening. And now we have a good community around us that we can all support the next person. But right. I think that it's so different to what the majority of doctors in our system are experiencing for their career through medicine, that joy is really, it's present in our jobs now every day, and just balance and satisfaction and learning. I'll learn every time I talk to another DPC doc, not just in a DPC way, but in a clinical way. I have a lot more time. I've had so much more time to learn as we've gone through the COVID journey and to educate people too. So that part is always exciting to the Alliance members. I think really believe in saving others. It's almost like we're trying to save others or just help them. They may not want to be saved, but we can help them see that there's another way.
Yep.
One thing I'm very passionate about is residents and students. We have a few residencies within 5 miles. We have 3 family practice residencies. I'm hoping maybe some of our residents will consider coming and learning about DPC at the Mastermind, because there is never a better time to start a DPC than right after residency. Cut out a lot of that pain that you may otherwise go through. So I would love to see that. I'm trying to encourage them to come. And I'll just say that we have been slow adopters in our part of the Midwest. And I know I've talked to probably 1 or 2 a month for the last 3 years, docs who are interested in DPC. Some have transitioned and started their own practices, and others are still trying to find the right time. So now is the right time to come and learn a lot if you are still interested, and tell your friends, because you won't regret it.
I agree completely.
And planning that trajectory, it's never too early to dream big. So wonderful. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. And for the listeners, again, dpcalliance.org is where to go to access the calendar. And then from there, you can access the links to the 2 masterminds mentioned today. And also on the accompanying blog with this podcast, we'll put some of the resources that Dr. Ryan mentioned as well. And one more bonus for today's episode. If you are not an Alliance member currently, there is a $50 discount using the code My DPC Story at checkout for when you register for the Masterminds. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you very much. Always a pleasure.